We did as well, but probably a bit less than you guys. Welcome in our session. I think for most of you, including me, this is in between being attentive and flying home. One thing I can guarantee you, we won't run out of time, because then I will miss my flight. What we're going to do the next 75 minutes is giving you some tips and tricks on how to implement UEV in relation to Windows 10. Who has never done anything in production with UEV? Okay, most of you. That's good. So you're going to learn a lot. That's the advantage of having the last session. Besides having a bit stress for making sure that you get out in time, is that all of you who's sitting here is probably interested in the topic.
Oh, you got nowhere to go.
Yeah. We like interaction. You know that the Ignite conference is built around social media, so please shout out as much as possible on Twitter. This guy is Micro Specialist. I'm PDT IT. And Adnan, why don't you present yourself?
Sure. Hi guys, my name is Adnan Hendricks. I'm based in the Netherlands, so this guy's Belgium. And we've been buddies for a while, working as IT pros and also doing a lot of training, a lot of consulting, and a lot of conferences around the world. We can just look this up later, but my Twitter handle is very important. If you have any questions, just hit me up anytime, day or night. I'm probably out somewhere working anyway, so if you have any questions, even during the session, we'll get back to you guys later with an answer.
All right, so I'm Peter de Tender. I'm from Belgium. Now, what's the first thing when you think about Belgium? Beer, right. To keep you guys awake, you can win one of the finest Belgian beers we have. It's the Chimay Blue, for the ones who know. I can recommend it.
The connoisseurs.
We also have chocolate, but that's more for girls, so any girls in the room? Thank God, okay.
No, we got a lady.
Besides doing Microsoft consultancy training, I've been busy with Microsoft technology about all my life. Well, not all my life, but since '96 somewhere. Been writing some books. I got a few copies with me as well, so it's not only beer you can also win a couple of books. And as Adnan already mentioned, we are good buddies, and 2 years ago we founded the Tegat Yellow Pants team. What do we do with the Tegat Yellow Pants team? It's technical education around the world, and it's our own little community. So yes, it's the two of us who's driving the community, but everybody who's here in the room can join this community. You go out to tegatyellowpantsteam.com, you sign up, and then of course you receive some spam emails, of which we hope that it's of interest.
We'll let you know when we may be in your city or in the States again, so you guys can follow a conference or free session that we offer.
So the first action to do for you guys is sending out a tweet, MS Ignite BRK3317, that's the session code, and tag at Yellow Pants team. And if possible, something positive.
Also, they need to follow us so we can send in
give
the
feedback
prize.
after the session. Right.
Yeah.
Anyone who sends out a tweet with the 3 keywords gets guaranteed a free ebook. You can choose between a Hyper-V one I wrote or an Exchange one. That's the marketing part. Now, we're all here for learning something about UEV. Now, by the show of hand, I know for most of you, it's pretty new. And it's actually pretty funny, because when I go to my customers and I hear their complaints about roaming profiles, for example, users who are moving between different machines, they log on a full desktop PC, the day after they work on a laptop, the day after they're somewhere in the factory logging on another machine, and for some point in time, their settings don't follow them. Who recognizes that issue? Yeah, but that's why you don't know UEV. So that's the first thing. Second thing, UEV exists for a couple of years already. It became famous around Windows 7, pretty good, Windows 8. And as Windows 10 is almost live, we thought, why not glue the two together because it can help you in doing the migration to Windows 10. Because outside of the main issue that the user settings aren't always following the user, another issue where a company is really afraid of is, what if I migrate my users to Windows 10? It's a new desktop, it's a new interface. What about their application settings? Will they roam or not? So by combining UEV and Windows 10, hopefully by the end of the session you will say, hey, Peter and Adnan, thank you very much. First of all, we learned a lot about UEV, and second, we're going to do a migration to Windows 10. And that makes Microsoft happy as well. So to start with, what is UEV? The official description out of Microsoft, UEV is a virtualization tool that enables users to move from one Windows device to the other. So you can roam the user between the devices. And very important, keeping operating system settings and application settings. A bit more technical, I know most of you in the room are pretty technical. It's a set of templates with location pointers to settings without containing the settings themselves. So think of registry keys in an XML file, something like that.
File locations.
Stick that to your mind for a couple of minutes. And it's part of MDOP. So it's not a free tool. It's not something you can download for free. It's actually part of a full suite. Maybe some in the room have heard about MDOP before?
It's kind of free, if
you have the right licenses. Now, just for the ones who don't know, MDOP, just in a couple of words, MDOP is a collection of tools. The only non-technical requirement is you need to be a volume license customer with software assurance on the desktop.
Enterprise agreement.
The components themselves, first of all, application virtualization, AppV, that allows you to run almost any application in its own little bubble. I would say a container, but then you start thinking about Docker, so that's not the best way to think of. Which allows you to migrate to run different similar applications like Office 2010, Office 2013 on the same PC, for example. UEV will be the rest of the session. Another one, but it's becoming a bit outdated, not really used anymore, is MEDV. That's Enterprise Desktop Virtualization. Think of the XP timeframe where you migrated to Windows 7. New operating system wasn't always compatible with the older XP applications. By using MEDV, you could run an XP virtual machine-alike something on your local desktop. And the end user had the impression that the application was actually Windows 7 compatible. Advanced Group Policy Management, it's the GPMC version 2.0. It's the optimized, gives you a bit more detailed, more reporting about Active Directory and group policies. BitLocker administration and monitoring. And the last one, diagnostics and recovery toolkit. So it's part of really useful, helpful components. Now with that, UEV. What's quite important, it's a replacement for roaming profiles. That's what we think. When you go out on the internet, and maybe somewhere next week you start playing with UEV yourself, you will find that it's not a full replacement for roaming profiles yet. But it can be. It depends a bit on applications, on settings you're using. Who is using roaming profiles in his environment? Yeah, most of you, right? Who's happy with the roaming profiles?
Any hands? Okay.
Bottle of beer? No? Nobody? Okay, sorry. It's only for Windows operating systems. It works on all flavors of Windows, and by a flavor, I mean a full desktop, a laptop. So imagine you have an end user, he's logging on a fixed desktop in the office. When he goes home, he's allowed to take a laptop with him because he's like traveling to a conference, for example. Out of the laptop, he connects to an RDS, Remote Desktop Services session, and all those application settings and operating system settings that are stored in the UEV will actually follow the end user. On-premise, in the cloud, it actually doesn't matter. And then the last one, for the time being, there are two versions, a 2.0 and a 2.1. It runs on everything Windows 7 and up, and Windows Server 2008 and up. Now, if we think about the user environment, it starts with an operating system, right? We have our physical machine, maybe our VDI client. It starts with the operating system. Windows, RDS, VDI, I mean, any flavor of the operating system. Next to that, we have our applications. What would the user do on his machine if he doesn't have any applications? So the applications can be, again, physically installed on the machine itself, or again, virtual by using AppV, for example. And then the user, he has a bit more settings, personal data, and application settings. So all these components in combination, that's the user environment. Networking is not really part of it. File shares isn't really part of it, but this is the user environment. So you know that all these components are the components that we can configure within UEV, and all these settings will migrate from the user to another machine. Just to make sure that you understand the issues and the main reason why we are talking about UEV, one of the things that I heard from my customer is, roaming profiles, they suck. I mean, everybody here in the room who's using roaming profiles, you all agreed, it's not really working well. Another little piece of technology that a bit's related to roaming profiles is folder redirection. Who's using folder redirection? And the next question, who's happy with folder redirection? And then you think like, yeah, I want to win the bottle of beer, but nah, it doesn't work. Or another issue, it works on one machine, but it doesn't work on another. Or it works on all machines, but not for all users. Or it runs fine as long as I'm using the same operating system version. I'm using Windows 7, everything works fine. The day I migrate to Windows 8, it doesn't work anymore. And the last one, it's a perfect solution as long as the infrastructure performs. Why there's some networking shared folders being involved. What if my backend doesn't respond? How can I solve that? Who says I recognize all 6 of the issues in my environment? Really? I hope you learned something this week to solve the problems.
Quite a lot of hands.
So we're pretty convinced that UEV can help you in solving all those issues. Now that's it, the current scope with UEV. How does it work? It's also easy to configure. What you need is a file share location. That's the first start. Keep it in mind for a couple of minutes, any file share can do. Next is you can deploy the agent by using an MSI script install, by using group policy install, for example. You can integrate with the other component out of the MDOP suite, AppV. It runs in RDS, so any typical user environment is supported. Imagine you're using Windows 7 on a desktop, on a laptop, you migrate to Windows 8, or you're using tablets, mobile devices by using RDS. The look and feel for the end user will be exactly the same. That's the whole point about UEV. UEV itself, 4 components. The first one, the file share location, is called the setting store. So how does it work? You have a UEV agent on your local client, or again in the VDI or RDS. You install the agent runs. It keeps track of the user settings. User settings whenever an application is shut down, or when the PC is logged off or the computer is shut down, it will synchronize those settings to a shared folder. Next to that, the third component is a settings location template. It's another shared folder where you can store specific application templates. And then we'll talk about that later on. And the last one is the UEV generator. UEV generator is a small component that allows you to generate your own templates where you can configure settings. We're talking about Office, for example. That's one of the examples we're going to talk about. The default Windows applications like Notepad, Calculator, I mean, that's all pretty easy. But you can create your own custom templates for your custom applications. Now with that, I think it's time for our first little demo. So what I have here is a logged off machine. We have a user. The user is Jack Problem. Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you for noticing.
Beer. Smart guy.
So we have a user, an end user. He's called Jack Problem. He might be somewhere in the room, I don't know. So I'm logging on to a client, Windows 8.1a. That's one machine. And I'm going to start my calculator. Pretty easy application, won't take that long, hopefully. That would be the best demo ever, that even calculator is not starting anymore. And just to show you, I'm running it in scientific mode, worksheets, and I picked the fuel economy. This is my application. I know calculator, it's not really something difficult to use, but now whenever I close this application, I'm going to make sure that everything can be synchronized. I log on to my second client.
Jack logs on.
And if everything is fine, I start up my calculator, and it's exactly the same. Round of applause for Jack Problem user. Now, how does it work? Let me show you a bit more in detail. You can think, yeah, but he probably pre-configured the calculators on both machines. I mean, I'm a technical guy. I attend sessions as well. So how does it work? Within our user profile that you're all familiar with since you're using roaming profiles, we have our profile directory in which, once the agent is being installed, there's a subdirectory called UEV with specific settings for my machine. And as you can see, there's a Microsoft calculator. So this is like a settings package specifically for that application. That specific application, from the time you start up the application on that machine for the first time, sorry, it will recognize your user credentials. It will verify the UEV shared folder on a file share, and it will verify, hey, are there any updates? It will pull them down from the server, and it makes sure that all the settings are roaming. Easy as that. I think with that we can, first of all, make the switch and hand it over to Adnan.
So, thanks, Peter. When we look at the implementation steps to implement UEV, you first have to look at your organization and plan it a little bit. So, looking at the architecture once again, you really just need a server share, and it could be any file share. You will also have your share for your templates. So it's one of the shares would be where the settings that you modify will be saved, and one of the shares will be the settings where you save all your templates. So you could have a catalog share where you can go and create custom templates for your custom applications and save these to that share, and that will sync with all your clients running the UEV agent, because all UEV really is an agent that runs on a client, looking at that share. Is there a new template for me for a new application? So it will sync that, and whenever the user modifies the settings within an application, it will go and sync that settings package to the file share. So when he logs in on another computer or another device, that share will sync with the agent, and that will be applied with the local files or folder selection for the application, and also the registry settings. So the registry keys and all the locations where those settings find themselves, that's really the content that you're syncing across all these devices. And that really creates that seamless user experience that we all want and desire. So it's really just the UEV agent. It consists of Windows settings, desktop application settings, and you could also sync your Windows 8 apps. And there are also many videos on this technology, on the internet, on YouTube. You might see myself. I presented quite a lot on this subject. And also a nice Microsoft Virtual Academy video where you can go and see how the agent works, installation, and follow these online courses. It's really a simple process, a 4-step process. You configure the storage location, and we use group policy to modify our organization's enterprise. Is there anybody here that doesn't use group policy?
Well, using group policy is pretty
Good.
cool.
If you followed Jeremy Moskowitz's session along with Darren, where they spoke about the new changes within Windows 10 and the group policy changes that will be made available. So you could have a look at that video or slide deck as well, because we're not going to go into too much detail on the changes. But you generally use group policy to go and modify, manage the agent. You could also still use group policy to install the agent. Question?
Just from a version level, is there 2008 R2 or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter.
So the question was, is there any minimum requirement for the Active Directory level? So as of 2003, it should work fine.
Yeah. So what you do is you go and download the ADMX templates for that specific version of UEV that you're running. We're using 2.1, so you'd apply that to your policy definitions. And then you can go and create a policy to manage that agent. Excuse me. You also go and create those templates. One of the demos, I'll go and show you how to go and create those templates using the UEV generator. And the last thing you do is really just deploy those templates within your organization by setting up a catalog share.
Can you stress that point about downloading the new ADXM templates when you upgrade to 2.1? Can you stress that point?
Stress that point.
You need to get the new templates when you get the new agent, otherwise you won't be able to.
Yes, the question or the comment was that if you're already using a previous version of UEV, so you're using 2.0 or 1.0, it's using an older ADMX or group policy settings file. So you want to upgrade to the latest version of that ADMX template, so you can use the new settings for UEV. So just remember that. You always need to upgrade. I know a couple of my clients also tried and done that and said, well, it's not working. And we installed the beta. They were doing beta testing when 2.1 was still in beta, and they still had some of the old policies running. Now, generally, you need to separate that from your production. As we all know, once you change group policy, it's immediately active. So try and separate that within your organization. So create a separate testing environment for your policies. So with the different profiles available, you have the preferred or the preference of a local profile. Windows 10 uses a version 5 profile. The previous versions all used their same unique version numbers of profiles. With Windows 7, you had specific version, and with Windows 8 there was no default version. You had to go and apply an update, an 8.1, to get a unique version number, for those of you that have done that. And of course, using a mandatory profile if you have a specific VDI, non-persistent VDI environment for that, to just create a fast login experience for those of the kind of clients that require that. Certain enterprises prefer having a mandatory profile, which I feel in today's day and age of end-user computing or user-centric computing, giving the user the ability to change, especially with bring your own device. So UEV and roaming user profiles, not really recommended for long term because of the way they synchronize. So if you're planning on migrating away from roaming user profile to UEV, enable it short term and then migrate off that until you've created enough templates and settings for all your applications. So instead of having a large bloated profile, it would be a really small profile, because in the past, quite often, for those of you that raised their hands that said they had issues with it, quite often you'd have to delete the entire thing, and if you're lucky and you backed it up, you'd have to restore that. Otherwise, the user settings were all gone. So for each user, you will log on, execute UEV-enabled applications, and then migrate away from that. When we look at the agent deployment, you could deploy using any method of deployment already existing in your organization. So if you're using System Center Configuration Manager to deploy applications, you could deploy the agent. If you're still using or utilizing group policy, you could deploy it that way. And you could either deploy the MSI or EXE. So,
anyone using group policies for software deployment? SCCM? Most of you, okay.
Windows Intune? Okay, that's good. You could also use any third-party tool. So on the slides, really just a couple of scenarios. So where you do a standard deployment using the default templates into the user's home folder on Active Directory. You can modify specific settings locations during the install and really just utilize a lot of setting options during the installation of the agent. Now, when you're using group policy, we'll look at it a little bit later in the demo. The order of preference. So, user targeted, and then the computer group policy options. Those are the locations that I've indicated. You can also use your configuration manager or PowerShell or modify using WMI. So we'll have a look at some of the PowerShell options. I know that Aaron in the previous session spoke about the combination of using the configuration, SCCM configuration management pack for UEV. So it's really just available as a download.
Anyone attended that session? It was right before this one. Okay.
Is there anybody using that method? No? Well, it really just monitors and remediates the client settings for UEV based on the configuration manager agent monitoring the client to see if the UEV agent is still compliant with its settings. So that's all that it is. It's data-driven using PowerShell scripts, and it just uses the baseline of the agent and sets that compliancy. When you have a look at the slide deck, you can see with the link where to download that. And we're all using PowerShell, right? Anybody not using PowerShell? A lot of good sessions this week. So using PowerShell, you can import the module or get a list of commandlets. I have links, and later we can have a look and see all the PowerShell options that you can configure. So getting a list, you could get a list of all the commandlets and to check the status of the agent, because all that it is really agent. Some extras, some more PowerShell commandlets. With version 2.1, you could roam user credentials, security settings. The question is still out on that, if you want to roam all your credential settings or keep it locally, depending on the device that you're using. And quite often, if you are in a situation where you don't want to roam those settings or the credential settings, you could just disable that option using this specific PowerShell commandlet. But let's go and look at the demo. Is it this one? Yeah. It's on my one machine. Ah. So this is my client. I can get some information on UEV. So with get UEV configuration, I can go and have a look and see if what my setting storage path and my template catalog path is, if UEV is enabled, and some other options. I have a whole list.
Change the sync settings or something.
Yeah, well, you synced it for me. So I just want to show you guys some of the group policy. So we generally modify the agent using the group policy instead of PowerShell. PowerShell, ideally you go for troubleshooting if there's a problem with the client. If you need to troubleshoot, is it enabled? Are there certain templates that are not working correctly? Is the sync working? So ideally, you'd use your PowerShell for troubleshooting. I'm just going into group policy, the policy that I have, drilling down to Microsoft User Experience Virtualization, found in the computer configuration under administrative templates, Windows components. And in my options, I have my sync, the synchronization, enabled with my sync provider method. Now what this means is that all my settings are being synced using a sync provider, a built-in sync provider that comes with UEV, the agent. You could also set it to external. External is great if you're using bring your own device, or utilizing Azure AD with Office 365, where you have OneDrive for Business, or utilizing work folders, or some other method of a file share, a local file share that's already synced with your organization. So if you're using Office 365 and you have OneDrive for Business, you could utilize those folders. so with the UEV templates on the external sync
Or
method.
Dropbox as well. Dropbox as a file share is also supported. Think back about the architectural image where I mentioned you have to use any file share. So it's not only the local file share on-premise in your own network, you can make use of cloud file shares as well.
So does it have to be OneDrive for Business, or could this be like where you're saying just any?
Well, the ones who are supported out of UEV is OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, and Dropbox for the time being.
Yeah.
But if you have another solution and it works, yeah, might be great.
Yeah, it's one of the supported methods.
Yep.
I think it would be for enterprise. Just like OneDrive, OneDrive for Business, supported.
Security is still important because it's, even if you configure it on your local machines, there are specific NTFS file share settings on the local folder because you don't want to make sure that the settings are roaming to some other user or someone gets access to your data, for example.
Especially if you're using credentials, roaming credentials. I think there were quite a few OneDrive for Business sessions. So have a look at those. You can also enable your setting storage path using your group policy and also your catalog path. So just some of the settings, synchronize, enable the Windows settings, also enabling or disable UEV. For example, if you testing or having some issues with UEV, you could disable it so that it doesn't sync anymore. Or just apply a setting where you have a selection of users working in a specific environment where you don't want them to sync. So it's up to you. And you can also sync selected Windows apps. Quite an important one. You can enable or disable the ping of the agent. Because what UEV does, especially if you're using a storage location on DFS, you can't ping a DFS location or server. So you will disable that so that that doesn't happen, and then you can use a DFS location. So that's pretty much it. Well, then it won't sync. You get a pop-up, but it won't be able to sync that. And another question?
Similar.
Mm-hmm.
If I disable the ping on a remote user, does it take a long time to time out?
The question is, if you're a remote user and you have disabled the ping, will it time out? Well, one of the options are synchronization timeout settings. So I haven't configured it, but you can enable and set the synchronization timeout settings where the user won't go and wait forever. So I hope that answers your question. You did it for beer?
You want to win a book? Yeah. One of the two is yours. You can pick it up if you want. Oh, you can come already and pick it up, no problem. I'll keep it. No?
So you have two computers and they're not synchronizing. Is it who last one in wins in regards to the synchronization error that possibly show up?
Well, there's different triggers. So for applications, it's really on open and close of the application. So last one always wins. The user also has the ability to, depending if you enable that, where he can go and sync. So he logs in and he can decide, I want to sync now. So if you allow the user to be able to use that functionality, you can manually apply the synchronization. No, only application settings.
But we can show you in the client we have running.
The same one.
Another question on DFS.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you have the ability to enable DFS. Do you support DFSR replication? All the documentation contradicts itself.
That's a difficult question. I believe that it will support DFSR. It's still DFS. You just have to enable or disable the ping.
Disable the ping.
Yeah.
And is DFSR a good way to keep everything synchronized across different locations?
I haven't used it in an environment yet, DFSR. Well, for this, I mean.
I can't really answer for this, but I know a lot of people are still using that for branch offices where they have low bandwidth. But there are other, new functionality and features available to different options. But a lot of companies are still utilizing that.
So to come back on the question from the gentleman in the front, what if, for example, something is not synchronizing between the clients? As you know from the beginning, there is the UEV agent. It's called the company settings center, but it's the UEV agent. And the end user by himself can select on the sync now. And then it will, again, synchronize with the backend file share, picking up the new settings. And then depending on the settings, it will tell you to log off, log on again, to make sure that all the settings are applied.
And that will be for Windows settings. So for applications, you don't need to log on or log off. You can just reopen them.
Yes, question?
Are there any limitations in terms of which applications we use for this application? So are some applications not going to have the settings?
So the question is what settings are like supported within UEV. There is a UEV generator to actually help you in creating your own settings template for that specific application. Best recommendation is or try it out, or go to, and Adnan will show you that later on. There's a public community-based website on one of the Microsoft pages where a lot of templates are already available. Switching.
So now we're going to have a look at the settings templates themselves. After you've created the location, it's really just XML format files. Once you install the agent, there's a number of default XML templates provided for you. It will be default Windows settings, Office 2007, 2010, and 2013 is supported, depending on which version you're using. 2.1 really just supports 2010 and 2013. And you can go and create your custom templates utilizing the agent, the generator. You'll place that into the catalog share. So once you've created templates, every time you create a new template, you upload it into your catalog share. That gets synced to all the clients within the hour. And as Peter mentioned, there's a gallery of community-based people like you and I, where they have created a template for some application and they've made it freely available for somebody to use. Some of my friends, speakers themselves, they have created some templates up there, which are quite handy to use. And I think it's best to just show you what you can do. Just ping me. So on the TechNet, gallery.technet.com website, you could really search for it. There's a whole bunch of pre-made templates and a whole list of them. So we can send you guys the link. The UEV generator is included as a setup with the UEV agent installer. So under the MDOT, you get 2 files. You install that on a clean machine where you've installed your custom application. So once you start the generator, there's certain settings. You could create a settings location template. You could edit an existing one. And a lot of us modified the existing Office templates before Microsoft made the 2013 templates available with the new version of 2.1. So you could go and edit certain existing templates. And the last option is validating a template. So I'm going to create a template. So you really go and look for the file of the application. I've installed an application on this machine.
You're using that as a production application in your environment?
So what UEV does, the generator does, it starts up that application. I go and modify the settings. So I've just selected don't show this again at startup. I can go and change certain preference settings. Quality. This could be any application, custom application. Yes. Ideally, you go and modify all your standard locations or settings that you want set or that you want to have saved. Once you've set all your options, you close your application. The generator will go and scan all those locations, all the things that I've enabled, all the file locations, all the registry locations. Once it's done, click Next. So the application hasn't really modified any registry locations, but it has modified certain settings. And as you can see, it's my configuration file. So all my settings that have been modified exist within that file. I click Next. I can change some information, application names. I can go and modify and add specific locations if I already know of an existing location that the generator doesn't know about to scan. So if you know the registry location, you can go and select that and change that. Files, file paths. This could even be a network location. So if you know of any settings, locations that needs to be added. And the last thing you do is click on Create, and it will go and create an XML file for this application.
What if some of the settings you change are system settings? Is it going to ignore them?
So the question is, what if certain settings are system settings, right? Will it ignore them? Mm-hmm.
Ideally, in a situation like that, it depends on the application. If the application allows you to change specific general settings, the generator will find the location of that existing file and will try and modify that. But I don't see really how something like that, if there's other users utilizing the same file, so the person modifying it the last will overwrite. And it will really just be for that user. So
Say that there was something on the local machine instead of current user.
no, it doesn't really work that way. It only looks at the current user, a local machine for the application. I'd suggest if you really have something like that, try it out. I don't really advise using a system like that. Well, it will notify the location of those files and registry. It doesn't really make any change here. It only notes down the locations. So.
UEB specific, but on the start screen, obviously, you were saying you have like problems with A, B, and C in direction. One of them, obviously, to get all the profiles is following the redirection to the suggested method right now for redirecting downloads and my documents. You just want to follow the redirection, but UEB internal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not that folder redirection will go away quickly, but it depends a bit on the user scenario. This is mainly for capturing user settings. It's not really for data like copying files over and stuff.
There was still a kind of a best practice recommendation to just still follow it.
Yeah. But in a couple of environments that I deployed, it's actually a combination of the three tools. So roaming profiles with folder redirection and UEV for specific application settings.
So I just want to show you guys the file that we just created. Thank you, Peter.
No.
As you can see, it's really just XML. So you can go and edit this file. I wouldn't advise that. But the generator does have a validation for the file if you've manually edited it. It won't check on validity of the actual data, only the context. So as you can see, some of the version number, my name that I filled in, and some of the settings paths and the location and name of the file. So this I can just copy into my catalog, and that will sync down to my agents for my custom files. Now you can, I'm done.
Yeah.
The fun stuff.
Now it's becoming really, really interesting. Who was happy with the demo so far? Okay, cool. Remember from the beginning, I mentioned we're going to talk about Windows 10. We can integrate any file share. You already heard we talk about OneDrive for Business, Dropbox Enterprise, SharePoint if you want. And based a bit on what at least for me is the key message of this conference, it's all about cloud, right? We're talking about Windows 10, we're talking about the new Windows Server, we're talking about Office 365, Azure Active Directory. Mobility. And it all comes together. So what if this is the exact same image that we had in the beginning, it's still the same user environment. We still have our file share. CCM for deploying the agent, MSI packages, on Windows 7 clients, Windows 7 laptops, Windows 8 tablets, it doesn't matter. The possible future is integrating, first of all, adopting Windows 10 and integrating with the cloud backend. For the time being, it's OneDrive that you can use, Dropbox. Anyone already playing with Azure files and folders? The native file shares in Azure? No? It's not really confirmed, but I'm pretty sure that one will work as well. And That's actually a pretty interesting thing. Think of a mobile user. He has his components, his applications, his settings on his local machine. He migrates to a laptop and it's reinstalling the machine, taking all the settings and so on. But what if you're migrating toward a even more mobile device scenario? An end user is maybe working from home from his own PC. He is using work folders. The same work folder shared folders can be used to store those settings. So think of a business application. Depending, of course, on licensing, but that's totally off topic. Imagine you can allow your user to install that business application on his home PC. The same settings from the business user on the business machine, his desktop in the office, can be roamed to his PC at home, or a mobile device that you're carrying with you when you're attending a conference, for example. By using cloud scenarios, so you don't have to configure VPN settings, you can make use of the backend, the cloud backend scenarios.
There were quite a number of Intune sessions for mobile workers.
So how does it work? I'm just going to show you what, for us at least, is the most ideal setup. It will still be a combination of, on the left side, Windows Active Directory. It's all driven by Active Directory. Next to that, Active Directory group policies. You're all familiar with AD, you're all familiar with group policies. Adnan showed you a couple of policy settings we can apply. And the next possible option is work folders. It's your internal file shares that are being exposed to the outside world in a secure way.
And what's one of the best features of Windows 10? You can use an Azure identity, a cloud identity as your login, as your primary identity on Windows 10. So you could log in with a cloud or Azure AD account. Let's say you have Office 365, so you utilize that identity as your login. And in the future, there will be single sign-on to applications in the cloud. If you have the agent deployed via Intune, you'd be able to sync all that settings based on your OneDrive for Business. So the future is really being mobile and really flexible. And that's why we're excited about Windows 10.
Yeah. Anyone already using Azure Active Directory for authentication, like Office 365, DirSync, those kind of things? Yeah. So it's exactly the same. You have your internal applications, you have your mobile user, and by using that same Active Directory account, it's pointing back to your internal Active Directory by using ADFS, and you got plenty of sessions on that this week. And everything else, the front end, will most probably be Azure files and folders. It's one of the options. OneDrive for Business, if you're already using Office 365. For example, Office 365 Pro Plus, so the full Office, let's call it Office 2013 from the cloud. That's how I explain it to my customers. There's also a template file available for Office 365 Pro Plus settings.
It's the same.
And Azure Remote App, we haven't really touched that one because otherwise we will definitely run out of time. But Azure Remote App is RDS from the cloud. It's integrated in your domain, so everything we've showed you will also work as an integration in Azure Remote App. You can do it, come on. So the possible scenarios that we see is, first of all, Windows 10. As I assume quite a lot of you have attended Windows 10 specific user session this week. Windows 10 will talk about user profile version 5. So it's a new user profile version. So it's not just copying over the user profile settings from Windows 7. Sorry, copying them over to Windows 10. Most probably it won't work. The next step is configuring the UE agent, must be UEV agent of course, to synchronize with the cloud storage. So think back about the short demo Adnan did using PowerShell, where you can change the sync provider, sync method to external. External means anything that's not running internal in my network. So no local file share, but anything else, and we mentioned them all already. Work folders, OneDrive for Business. It can help you to migrate specific user settings and in certain cases Windows settings from Windows 7, Windows 8 to Windows 10. Actually meaning it's not really scary anymore for your end user to migrate away from 7 or 8. The application settings will follow the user. The interface looks a bit different. We all know that Windows 10 looks a lot different than 8 and 7. But the application, if it's still the same version, those settings will roam.
Who's using IE11 on Windows 7? What do you get on Windows 10? IE11. So,
Edge.
and Edge, the future.
Last couple of words, what's coming next? We're talking about Windows 10. Short update about UEV. And the ones who were in Aaron's session right before this one, they already know about this. Everything we showed you today is running on UEV version 2.1. It's about 6-7 months old. There is a UEV 2.1 SP1 coming out,
For Windows 10.
which is mainly the baseline for Windows 10. Easily said, if you're migrating to Windows 10, like one of the questions we got before, most probably you have to update your ADMX files to the latest SP1 UEV 2.1 version. So Windows 10 is like the trigger for doing the update to SP1. And also compatibility with Windows 10 desktop settings, who are a bit different than the previous Windows 7, Windows 8 desktop settings. Another interesting one, sorry, is integration or compatibility for Office 2016. It's been announced somewhere this week to make sure that the templates are working, that the templates are not provided out of the community for the new Office version. Microsoft decided, okay, we're going to publish a new version of the agent, SP1, compatibility Windows 10 and Office 2016. A couple of other things that are updated. Again, integration with the cloud, defining your HomePod settings. It's an optimized version. How does it work on Windows 10? Come on. Just a really short demo. We showed you already most of it, but
Far left. Yeah.
so for the time being, we are using the 2.1. And as you can see, out of the templates we installed in our catalog in the backend, it's recognizing settings for all those applications. There's no difference in using this agent between 7, 8, or Windows 10. Now, what we found out is that for certain applications, the settings aren't really roaming anymore on Windows 10. The agent, the SP1, has just been announced like, let's say 2 hours ago. So we didn't really had the possibility ourselves. We don't have any hands-on SP1 version because, it's not available yet. Aaron is the product manager, or one of the product managers, so he received the privilege for showing how great it works. But the easy thing is, if you're already working with the 2.0, 2.1 version, it's all the same. It's deploying the agent by any methodology you can think of. Configuration setting, template settings for your applications, it should be pretty compatible.
And easy to upgrade.
Who's already using Windows 10? Who will use Windows 10 as of next week? So with that, we got some about 10 minutes left for Q&A. We got some gifts to hand out as well. What we try to show you is giving you an explanation on UEV. I wouldn't say it's an old technology, but it's one of the unknown technologies, let's call it like that, which can be used in roaming scenarios, mobile device, bring your own device scenarios, and giving a handshake to Windows 10. That was the main goal of the session.
It's definitely an enabler, moving ahead, getting all those settings that your users are using at the moment and getting them over to the new OS if you're doing a migration. So really have a look at it. It's saved a couple of hours of my time doing certain projects. Question?
Yeah, just we're using that. So just to differentiate between Unity and Apple, we're pushing out that application. But just from my understanding, because I'm not the guy with that, is this is going to be able to take customization by that end user and move it up. Is that a good way to summarize it?
So the question is really, does it work with AppV?
Well, we're using AppV
Yeah.
to push out the app, right?
Yeah.
What I'm seeing here, when I customize that to be sent to that AppV app, then that's going to be wrong.
Yes. So the answer, to answer your question, UEV works with AppV and locally installed applications. So it doesn't really matter what kind, how the application is installed, how it's being streamed. Creating the template for an AppV, for solely AppV, I'd say there's a specific way of generating the template. So you'd install the application locally and then go and create that template.
Mike's not on. There was a previous session where they specifically did that. So, I mean, there's a session previously on that.
Aaron?
On using UEV with AppV. So, and you pretty much just restore the app back and then you run the wizard.
It's really better together because it's part of MDOC. It really complements one another.
And for the gentleman who asked about DFSR, it's specifically not allowed, same as user profile. So you can have DFS, but you cannot do DFSR on your targets.
Yes?
Situations where you have single sign-on applications like Cecilian or Kavada, where your desktop is running a service account, and user walks up, taps in any application they launch, run with their app credentials for the desktop or the service account. Will the agent recognize that and give them their own settings, or is it only one console setting?
Good question. So it's a combination of using a local user, if I understand correctly, and mhm.
Run the app as a different user under the main user, but the agent's probably going to pick up the user over the Yes.
I actually have no idea. Yeah.
Yep, you get the beer.
So they want the agent to pick up applications running as and for those settings, save it off to a different profile or a different user profile.
My assumption is that as it's using the user profile settings, that it will pick up the user profile settings from the run as user.
If it should. Has there been any documentation for the XML of template file?
On how to generate them manually, or
Yeah. I know a couple of years ago at MMS, they talked about we're working on documentation for, each of those different types of commands. Have y'all heard anything about that?
No.
not really. What I normally do is starting from the generator, because that creates like an empty structured template, and then modifying as much as possible. Yeah. But again, the community shared folder is pretty interesting. Tons of applications are already been pushed in a template, so you could start from that actually. Yes?
Is there an API for third parties to use UEV?
I think Aaron showed in his session maybe. Not really an API, but third parties may be providing a template for the application based on the specific version of UEV. So they'll go and provide it just like Microsoft provides Office templates.
Yes, question in the back.
Use regex expressions for the version numbers for inputless, or would you just do 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, build it throughout there?
I would go for the second option.
At the back, there we have.
You can lock down, it's like server share, that way when the machine pulls down and the settings are changed, instead of uploading it, we download it, that way it would stay the same. Or instead.
So you mean like the client can download from the file share?
Yeah, the client, it would never change on the client, it would always grabs it from share.
No. No, because it's creating a local copy as well on the client.
I don't know if there's a way that you could lock it down, and that way it always grabs from there.
Read
I don't
only?
see a reason for. It might block the scenario.
Yeah.
Because what happens if an end user is changing settings in the application, an easy example in Word, he wants to change the default font. Then he changes those settings. It will sync back from the local cache to the file share. And then on the next logon attempt or another PC, or when he starts up the application again, he wants to make sure that those settings are there, right? Or that's the piece that you want to avoid.
Yeah, it would be, on a per application, per user basis.
I haven't played with it yet.
Certain settings aren't available for policy. So you want forced to keep using the same settings, you just make them what they come back down the same way.
But that's a bit, I know, but based on the questions, it's again a combination of different tools. We have group policies where you have the Office template where you can modify settings out of group policies by themselves. Windows settings can be triggered or configured by using group policies. So it's what we mentioned in the beginning, it's part of a combination of different tools. Think of the UEV, AppV, the Active Directory group policy monitor. So it depends a bit on your specific scenario, maybe on the specific application that you're using. Should you use the group policies for managing Office settings, or should I go with UEV? It depends a bit on your scenario. So think of a combination of different components. Like AppV, I think, is a great example. But first of all, not all applications are running inside an AppV bubble. That's the first one. But those settings, if they are compatible with UEV, the settings will work both in an AV bubble and on the locally installed applications. So that's a typical scenario where UEV comes in play, where there's no other solution.
And I just recently tweeted the download of a document that lists all the settings that UEV can affect for Office. So follow me on Twitter. I'll retweet it later.
Say it's like got users working on desktops and devices, and they're free to change settings in Word or something, right, or Excel.
Yeah.
And then I turn around and they go an RDS to a server, right, which is for a specific application, so they require specific settings. So I've got group policy applying them, so they can't be changed to group policy when. Because obviously, if I'm enforcing it to be effectively using the loopback profile of the GPO to ensure that when they log on to this and they remotely launch Citrix apps or remotely launch Excel, obviously they might be changing up their end devices, but when they log into this environment, I want it to be enforced. So if I've got it enforced with GPO, it should win still.
You just, to answer, the question was if he's using GPO to enforce certain settings in an RDS type of environment. Ideally, the answer to that would be don't use UEV then, or exclude the template for that application.
Oh, well, I guess don't put the agent.
Don't put the agent. Yeah. Question? Windows apps, yes.
Last question. Well, if you've got other questions, we can take them here offline, because we have to make sure that they can start.
Can you just click
clean up the
once?
room? A couple of important things to mention. The last one, actually. Use the
Most
evaluation.
important. Please
We know that
evaluate the session.
Are we really going to talk together now? Yeah, okay. No. Let me finish. Evaluation is pretty important. We have to mention this, I know. And I know filling out evaluations is a pretty boring, but we got the Ignite client. It's making a selection from excellent session all the way down to the most boring session ever. Just pick the first one, of course. But that's important for us to know, was it a good topic? Is there any interest in the technology? And also giving feedback to Microsoft as well. I mean, if you all think like, hey, this is a great session, then maybe next year we can talk about UEV version 3.0, I don't know. So with that, we'd like to thank you for being here. I know it was not always that easy, deciding between going home yet or maybe getting out in the city, do some sightseeing. So we really appreciate that you were all here. I pointed out, I don't remember who, I pointed out for the ones who got a book, who remembers the brand, the exact brand of the bottle? The bottle of beer, of course. The brand? Belgian beer, okay. Getting closer. Was it Duvel? Was it?
Mention a couple of options.
Nah. That's part of the name, yeah. We have to, so I have to try another question.
Okay.
What will be the next version name of the UEV agent? Nope. 2.1 SP1 is the full name. You won yourself a bottle of beer. Thank you very much.